Hello, hello. Okay, we're live. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. We have with us from Taos, Nikesha Breeze, who's going to be reading from their book, A Mutiny of Morning, Reclaiming the Black Body from Heart of Darkness. For this project, Nikesha took Joseph Conrad's 1899 racist novella, Heart of Darkness, and through a precise and methodical process, Nikesha eliminates and selects text, seeking to illuminate the invisible black voices so disregarded in Heart of Darkness. It is, as Nikesha states, a radical, surgical, and unapologetic black appropriation. Nikesha's work has been shown nationally and internationally, and of course here in New Mexico, and we've shown Nikesha's work at 516 before, so we're so thrilled to have them back. Elements of this project are part of this installation here, and we're so glad to have them be a part of New Worlds. After Nikesha's reading, we're going to have a brief talk, open it up to an audience Q&A, and also, if you haven't already, copies are available, and also a signing. Thank you, and welcome to Nikesha.
Beautiful introduction. I'm not sure, is this directed? Oh, there it is.
There we go.
Yay, okay, there it works. Hi. Thank you all for coming today. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the time on this kind of rainy, sweet day. This morning driving in from Taos, it was raining a lot, and I was going through the walking rain, so you'd have these walls of rain and then dry road, and walls of rain and dry road. And I just kept feeling that call back in. I was so glad to come and be able to sit and read with you, reminded of rainy mornings and evenings, reading by the fire. This book, A Mutiny of Morning, wasn't always going to be a book. It was actually, I wonder sometimes how it came, in my heart, because it really was like a journal process. It was a book I had in my bag that I found in a free box that I just, of course, as soon as I saw it, I knew the book. We know the book. It's a book that we've seen and we've had assigned to us in college classes. It's a book that we've had discussions on or not. Heart of Darkness is a quote-unquote classic of our time. And I picked it up and was like, oh God, this book. Oh, this book, And there was some part of me that wanted to tear it up somehow. And I think the beginning of it was that. It was a tearing it up. It was a cutting it out. It was a choosing what I wanted, wanting to listen to something deeper inside the text. So it got thrown around in my bag for a year. And I would pull it out when I was waiting for something. I'd pull it out when I was sitting quietly, and I would open a page and allow myself to listen. I had the beautiful introduction. JC, spoke of the surgical cutting of the work, and I find with everything that I do, all of my artwork is really based in process, and process is important, as ritual is, to keep us sort of aligned with our integrity and not swayed and not moved, sometimes outside into our romanticism. There's a way when we move through very specific process, from spiritual practice to ritual practice to systematic science, all the same. We are allowing ourselves to kind of step aside and have something else take over, a rule. So these rules that I played and laid out for this novella were very important to keep me in line and to keep the spirits of the voices that I was trying to call forward alive. I want to read my introduction. If you haven't read the book yet or seen it, this just kind of grounds the work and also dedication to the beings inside it before I start. Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad, written in 1899, is a racist book. Conrad himself was a white man, a racist, a white supremacist, and a talented writer. Now, of course, those denotions can be and are and have been criticized many times. There's a lot of complexity in this man. But at its root, these are things that come true. Conrad was also a man of his time, a time filled with the endless death, enslavement, and dehumanization of African people. As an artist, Conrad used his gift to both invisibilize and grossly misrepresent and dehumanize African people, their lands, and their customs. This abuse was made through his writing, through his interpretation, and his need to tell his own story. That is the story of European colonization and the instability of white psyche. In this artistic expression of the reality of white psychosis, he used the African people as his props and texture for his own darkness. The use of the black body in this way as a backdrop to the horrors of the white psychological demise, as well as literary device to inflict the images of this dangerous and ugly other. Conrad capitalized on the ongoing European fetish with Black Death and the imperialistic power grab for African resources. Conrad's hypnotic writing style and the short length of the novel made this work a classic of white supremacist and colonialist society. Heart of Darkness and its insidious racism has been deeply dissected and commented on by African scholar Chinua Achebe in his book, An Image of Africa, Racism in Conrad's Heart of Darkness. Achebe writes, Africa as setting and backdrop, which eliminates the African as human factor, Africa as metaphysical battlefield, devoid of all recognizable humanity, into which the wandering European enters at his peril. Can nobody see the preposterous and perverse arrogance in thus reducing Africa to the role of prop for the breakup of one European's mind? The point here that is made so eloquently by Mr. Achebe is the inhumanity that is so easily and painfully placed on the black bodies of the Congo. He notes the way that these African people were so thoroughly ignored, and at the same time their images and souls were so grossly and grotesquely fabricated. These black anonymous people were somehow made necessary for the white body to express its otherness. This work is dedicated to those invisibilized people who populate the margins of this text, to the Bantu, the Mongo, the Luba, the Congo, and the Congolese people of the Congo River Basin, whose lives and bodies were so painfully brutalized by the colonization, enslavement, and genocide. In this book, I have taken Conrad's pages, his words, and left his colonized mind. I've made the words my own. I seek to illuminate the invisible black voices inside, to call out of the spaces between the words and the images to those African lives, bodies, and stories that have floated like ghosts in the text for over 100 years. It is a radical, surgical, and unapologetic black appropriation, at the same time as a careful birthing and a spiritual roadmap. My process has always been in ritual. In this work, it is no different. Page by page, I followed a set of rules so as to make space for the ancestors living there to arise without coercion. The rules are strange and specific to me. They make the boundaries and pathways while I travel the dangerous terrain of Conrad's world. In order to enter this work with true guidance, I had to be adamant about my engagement. Here are the rules I set for myself. 1, do not read the page. Ever. Do not for even a moment dip into the imaginary world that is crafted out of these black bodies. If the page is read at any point, even a sentence, leave it immediately. Consider the page finished and wait to return to it for at least 3 days. 2, begin at the top of the page. Draw down from the head to the foot of the page, as if you are manifesting a body. Do not skip down or try to create a work of art or a poem. Follow the words that emerge, one by one, from the top line to the last, like footsteps through the dark. You must keep the pace of the ancestors. Let them speak. If you skip or try to look ahead, you must leave the page immediately, leave it unfinished and walk away. Come back when you're ready to listen deeper. 3. Allow the voices to weep if they need to mourn, to speak of fear or pain. At the same time, do not shy away from the mystical and beautiful images that arise. The strange images are forming over this expanse of time and space. Let the body grow in the poem. Let it end when it must. 4. The poem must be finished in one page, so that each page is a single portrait. Let it be. This work was slow and careful, following each of the rules like they came from elders. Listening to what emerged, I realized that this may be my most spiritual work. Somehow my deepest understandings came through. Even now, as I read them, I find new beauty, new teachers. It's as if I received a religious text from ancestors I could have never dreamed of. As you read, I encourage you to not read the background text. I left it as a tension point for you to teach your mind to avoid the colonist trap. Instead, follow the selected words. Follow the shape of the black body. As I step into the text, one of the things that I found in my reading again and again is that there are themes that run throughout it. And in particular, there's a whole number of poems that are painful, that are hard, that are afraid, that are painting textural images that are hard to shake. And especially now, as all of our bodies are alive with the pains and sufferings of the world and the world's, death and violence. These words and these poems hit even stronger. Some of the images and feelings are images we are seeing now in our lives. And so there is a whole section, almost like a conversation between these painful poems and then ones that are hopeful and brilliant and subtle and speaking of, as I said in the intro, deep spiritual understandings. So I want to read kind of in conversation. I'm going to read a few poems that I find to be on the side of pain and a few poems on the side of hope. Each other's yarns. The wind, calm, like the beginning. The luminous, mournful earth. Between us, the bond of each other's yarns. The bones, the palms of hands. Silence, nothing. That lonely ship called nature. Some sinister idleness, oily, senseless, like something momentary, white, grotesque, a world of war, limp like a rag. The empty immensity of earth, sky, and water vanish a little, disappear somewhere. That lonely ship called nature, whose waters writhe in impotent despair, grew upon me like nightmares. A kind of offer. The blinding sunshine, insidious as a warning. I avoided the purpose of divine desire more than a scar. I had been broken, some inferno rushing, the mournful stillness, the tearing of the earth, clinging to the pain and despair, dying slowly. Shadows of the lost, free as air. Black bones against the tree. A kind of offer held. This is called A Young Man at the Shore. It was some 200 miles higher up. A young man at the shore asked, with great precision, what becomes of that man who hanged himself on the road? Evanescent in the air. To close the mouth of the face. Heavy veil. To start again. To close the mouth of the heavy face. A veil removed my naked breasts, glistening. Bronze, lifting in the wind. A voice screamed, turn back. A doorway, poisoned. A rifle at my back. The sudden twist, the smoke. I knew the water was deep. I threw my head back, evanescent in the air. Now, a touch of light. We supernatural beings. These things fall upon us. These things fall upon faithfulness. To know you are a soul exalted. To be the earth, to speak, your strength, the faith in your ability, the devotion to yourself. That's difficult enough. I am not vanished. The suppression of future eloquence and unspeakable light. We supernatural beings from magnificent immensity, unbound eloquence, burning words. We came up with strength, their skins no longer restraining secrets. A new light pervaded all, a wilderness in being, some kind of breeze, black thoughts, one soul dazzling to be seen. A mystery greater than the inexplicable grief. Whispers. We came up. It was impossible. We let go of the bottom. No move, no mind. Being was enough. Being was enough. I believe in this extravagant mystery, time, an old, careful innocence. Now, her last gasp of truth, like the last tree. Keep human patience, speech, silence, insight, essentials beyond power. Being was enough. the greatest possible tenderness. Full of knowledge, that transparent greatness of thirst, made of polished bones, slipped past miles of silence. Time, the unrecognizable river, a torn curtain of faces, thumbed into a state of softness. The greatest possible tenderness, dissolve in the luminous sensation of something real. A small sketch in oils. A clay fragment waiting for an act of special creation. They were all waiting for something, as far as I could see. Everything was desire. A little world of saints trying to get to the sepulchral city. Imagine my body, full of nothing but perfectly shameless movement. A small sketch in oils. A woman carrying a torch, almost black. Come back into some of the pieces of anger. Praying to a corpse. Clay, born in time, the way of life, sometimes sunshine, sometimes hands like faithless pilgrims praying to a corpse. I've never seen anything so unreal. Invincible truth that would consume the light. Arms lifted high, hopeless, a heap of embers sitting in the dark. Then the words, take advantage of this. Carriers of the dead. Strips of sunlight on the floor distract my attention. A murmur of voices. The carriers of the dead, alluding to the moment the noise ceased. I could still see that grove of death. A god drowned in the surf. And time carried off millions for profit. The worthy and beautiful men left the world. The earth, as far as I could see, like an enigma, mute with an air of whispering. The dark, black sea seemed to glisten above them. The untouched expanse, like a god drowned in the surf. Say goodbye. My pulse, threadbare. Some madness is taking individuals in my country. The English say, goodbye. Say goodbye to my excellent aunt, to the wife of the high dignitary, to how many more people? A man appears like an emissary of rot. And a few more to leave us in the heart. Indefinable words of power. The soul knew no faith. I carried half a ton on my back, arm clasped around a child, naked, quivering, breathing black smoke into red earth. The scarlet bodies, black skin, like language. There was more air there. The woman with tawny cheeks, her hands articulated indefinable words of power. The last remarkable edge. I remained dark earth. They buried me. I remained mysterious knowledge with nothing underfoot. Great, still wisdom. The last remarkable edge. Remarkable expression. A commingling of pain and sincerity compressed into the invisible. The terrifying simplicity of soul. Of the necessities of human existence, memory was life. The passage, as still as if to devour a shadow of eloquence. The gloom of the forests, the beat of the drum, the beating heart of wilderness, the glow of the terrifying simplicity of soul. I am more than justice. A door opened. I rose, all black. Light. She was in mourning, not suffering. The dark eyes trustful, as though to mourn she died too. Do you understand? A deep despairing, a human being to behold. Intimacy grows quickly, unsteadily. Love silencing me. The room illumined by unextinguishable light. Last one. All the remaining light. Darkness deepened under the certitude of sympathy, as thirsty men drank all life, some comparative poverty. Intensity is the gift of the great, to have sorrow swayed by the wind. Incomprehensible words whisper from beyond the threshold, something like despair, faith that shone from beautiful generosity. Eyes full of tears seemed to catch all the remaining light. Greatness is impossible. hidden in her hands. The inconceivable pain hidden in her hands. Heavens fall for such a wonder. Justice, dark and silent in the pose of a meditating Buddha. A black, tranquil earth flowed under an overcast sky.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you, I appreciate that. All right. I wanted to talk to you about a couple of things with this really powerful book. And one of the things that was interesting for me, having read this book, I read it consecutively, and it has this flow, this consecutive flow through Heart of Darkness.
Thank you.
Oh, my apologies. We have the university in a couple.
And then experiencing this reading here tonight and my introduction to this body of work, which is through these individual pages displayed as objects. I, of course, was thinking then in the sort of guidepost that you provide for readers too, and as well as you explaining yours yourself. Do you have any kind of thoughts around how a reader would approach this body of work to be read consecutively, or should they be treated as these kind of individual moments? Curious about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I love it. As I was saying in the beginning, I didn't write it consecutively. I wrote it, I would open the page wherever it would be, and sometimes it would be a poem that was still in process, one that I had abandoned because of its, I read it or something, and so it was coming back and listening, and so I was moving throughout it, and going through it like I did today, trying to pull out the different themes, I could actually see how the book itself had its own arc too, right? There were places in the very beginning it felt much harsher, then it softens a little bit in the storytelling, and then it comes back into a different state. And so I'm curious, I've never read it consecutively from the beginning to the end, so I'm inspired by your process and I would love to try and do that. I'm curious how it felt for you, if it felt like you were following a story, or if the poems jumped around too much.
It felt like that there was, I want to talk about the tension.
Yeah.
So the tension element is something that I was aware of in reading the introduction, but even if I hadn't, it's present, it's there. And I was so mindful of this interplay, of this very visual. So in the book you'll see on one side is the physical page, and then the other is the text arranged as so. And in the reading and flow, you're kind of, even if you're not looking at the visual page, you're aware of those breaks. And so I'm aware of the source material, even though I'm not referring to the source material or dipping into Conrad's words, as you say. So back to you talking about my experience reading it consecutively, at the end, I felt emotionally as though there were this arc or ups and downs and flows unrelated to Conrad's work, but somehow implicit in the work. And it was really quite profound. and a bit, like I said, it was sort of visceral in that way. So yeah, and so I was curious, I'm like, did I do this right?
Yeah, I don't think there's any right way. I think as you're approaching it, like, that is the thing. And I love that you said visceral. That's one of the things that I find so striking in this work is the textural quality of the passages. Every time I read it, even now too, I'm like hit with the physical, textural relationships that I feel. Every time there's smoke still lingering, in my mind as I read it. And there's something there that yeah, I'm curious how it flows along. I have no understanding of how it relates to Conrad's. I've been very strict about not making the comparisons. So.
Which, I mean, you read the rules out in the beginning that you apply to yourself. How did you come into developing those parameters and those boundaries when approaching this?
I have a long history of spiritual and ritual practice in my life. I'm, part of my local temples. I'm, someone who is deeply dedicated to ritual process and practice. And I found, like I was saying in the beginning, there's so many rules when we come into spiritual practice. And whatever church you belong to or whatever practice you move into in your life, in creative practice, there's particular ways you enter things. And so for me with this one, there was an impetus on the protection of the voices, right? And so there's this place in all service and caring for beings that, we want to try and make sure that all of the container is really held for them to come through and feel safe, right? So it's like trauma-informed process, right? Because these are traumatic voices that are here in this work, traumatized voices. And so how do I do that? Well, I want to do my very best to make a space that is not filled with the even subtle ideation of the colonial conversation. I don't want, so I had to make it really clear where it's like, if I wander, which is normal, which is human, right, into these places that are not totally aligned with my integrity, reading the book, that I have to then not punish myself, but I have to allow more space. It's like, oh, I got really small in my thinking here. I fell into a place that is outside of my integrity. How can I expand back out into my heart? How can I expand back out into a circle of protection? And that, for me, is often time. So the 3 days away, go away. It's like a form of discipline actually to create more expansive space and time for myself to listen deeper, to hear more, to be more subtle, and not just get distracted so easily. And so the rules come from kind of a lifetime of being like, okay, what does it mean to actually be disciplined in my spiritual practice? Well, it means incorporating these types of things.
Well, and it opens the space too for the reader as a sort of a retraining moment and a focus moment to kind of follow a similar procedure that you did, and I think acknowledges conditioning that maybe we all experience, and societal conditioning in one way or another, and that's sort of like a portal through it in a way. I think that in that tension, even just ontologically and visually, the words really do transcend and shine through even amidst that while you're reading it. So with that, I was wondering, you talked about when you were first working on this project and how you wanted to tear it apart. I was wondering if you first saw it as a visual presentation like we see here in this installation, or in this book form, or both. How did you first see it?
Like I said, I didn't even know it was going to be anything, a book or an art piece. In a way, it was a way for me to work through my unconscious and to kind of be. I didn't think it was something for anyone else. It was like a random free box book, and use my scribbles. It was just in my bag. But it was after a year working on it and finishing it, and the whole thing, because it was also used and because I was opening it and closing it, working on it so much, the pages got loose and began to break out of their binding anyway, so the book itself was starting to fall apart, which also was interesting because I wanted to tear it apart in the beginning, but I sort of did it slowly. So when that happened and I had all of these pages and every page was finished, I realized how kind of powerful it was. I mean, it was a powerful piece, and it was something that was significant, and I did start thinking, well, how do I show this? Can I show this to people? How do I share what I did? Because there's a lot here. And so this, installation method it came, really because I started to go deeper into the idea of the dissection, that I was, pulling out and cutting out and surgically separating the text. And so I wanted to have something that felt like that also, that would kind of extrapolate and expand this language and this narrative into something much bigger. So, it would fill a whole room almost, to do every page of the book, right? But it reminds me of like medical slides, when you slice apart a cell into these individual pieces to get those fine details. That's kind of how it grew organically in the process. And of course, once it was here, then it was like, well, we better publish it. You should probably try to make it a book too. So.
Well, brilliant, thank you. I was curious that through your process of doing this and creating this work, and even through the process of turning it into a book and displaying it, did it inform any other bodies of work that you created afterwards and other elements of your practice?
I guess there is some kind of simultaneity happening. I mean, I'm excited to see how it continues. This work will continue to seed forward and grow other pieces. There was one piece that was happening sort of in tandem while I was working on this book, where I had taken the American Heritage Dictionary and just did tear it apart. And I threw it into a bunch of trash bags with a bunch of ink and paint and crunched them all up, like trash, it was really like blood and oil, all of these symbologies, thrown into a trash bag, the American Heritage Dictionary. And then I pulled all those pages out and did blackout poetry on them, and then reconstructed it into a large, like assemblage that resembled 3 large vulvas that also look like Guadalupe. And it's all the language. So that one was sort of this rough version. It was called a tribute to my mother, which is, a beautiful piece. So there is that it definitely inspired. But I'm curious about more text work. I'm curious about art books and what that looks like. There's an entire world of art books and ways that people utilize text to bring about their ideas. So I think it's a good, little seed for something more to come.
Brilliant. And that piece sounds quite amazing.
It's really cool, yeah. It's on my website. You can see it. There's like books hanging from the cliffs. It's the whole thing.
Well, that's great. Well, I'd love to give an opportunity if anyone has any questions in the audience they'd like to ask.
Yes, please.
Hi, thank you so much for sharing this process and your work with us. I was curious when you spoke about the process of kind of going from the head to the feet of the page, and I haven't looked at your pages, so I don't know if you added words or was it really the words that were there?
It's only the words that were there.
Okay, and then my follow-up was did you, were you kind of guided to the words to select, or did you have sort of a writing process of similar to if you're writing the poetry to figure out? I was just curious more about the process.
I didn't. Part of it was that where I would start at the top, so I'd open up a blank page and just look at the first couple lines, and if a single word jumped out, I would just put a square around it, and without any knowledge of what might come next. And so it was like that then word would communicate to the next series. So it was just keeping a soft gaze, actually, because it wasn't about reading or trying to find words. It was about allowing something to come. So I would keep a soft gaze. I would allow myself to scan and then kind of catch a word. It was like a word would jump, and then I would catch it with the square. And I would do that until it would stop. If another one wouldn't come, I wouldn't force it. That's where I was let the ancestors speak. They might be slow, they might take time. So it would be, sometimes they'd be fully unfinished. There was one here, there's 2 that are very, very short. Let me see if I can find it. This one, you can see the page has only the words at the very top. And the words were, I was becoming interesting. That was it. That was all that happened on that page. No other words came, and that one's kind of funny and sweet. It's just like a light poem. Whereas another one that was also very, very short that continues to hit me. Actually, today even I was reading and broke into tears, but let me see if I can find it. I have it memorized, but it just says, "Was that body hanging, my friend?" So, allowance.
I knew when you were saying that there's another one, I was like, oh gosh, it definitely stuck with me. So,
Although, just to say, because it's a follow-up, this morning, like I said, I read that, and it's close to those who do know me know I have some really close and personal experience with death in this way. And I read that today. I broke out crying. And then I turned the page. And the very next poem says, "It's all right. It's all right. It was all over. The sunshine, like shadow, vanished. And all of a sudden, it was all right. They meant no harm. My faith in the breath, more than all your silence."
thank you. Does anyone else have a question? All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining. Oh,
Please.
Sorry, I was just so formally. Thank you very much for sharing that. It seems to me like it's so much easier to colonize a people when you can deprive them of their humanity, when you can make sure that they're not people in your mind and how you conceive of the world. I think some of that in history, from my experience, has been in depriving people the lodestars, touchstones of civilization. Beyond mathematics and philosophy, poetry, there's monumental architecture and metal tools, which not all civilizations had. And so sometimes in the West, they are not deemed civilizations because they didn't have these same tropes that so much of European and now American culture have. And so thinking of that, I was really impressed by the consistency with which you focus on things that escape weight and measure, breath, soul, voice, indefinable words, and unexhaustible light. And so I wonder, I don't know if you thought about this before, or if you're thinking about it while I'm speaking now, about the connection to this long history of greatness that doesn't have necessarily stone monuments, outside of Egypt, or tablets with recorded language, but rather oral histories that are passed on generations. Do you feel an affinity with that history? Is your effort to continue to use ineffable sort of ideas a way of memorializing that, or is it just your own personal expression and unrelated to how people millennia ago express themselves?
It's interesting, even with these pieces behind me, these 3 copper pieces, you'll see they hold very particular gestures. This one here, clutching the heart, here with the single finger, and this one with the sort of gesture of offering. The gestures, like these concepts of soul, light, you know, breath, silence, voice. You know, these are, to me, the sort of most sustainable, you know, unbreakable, you know, most powerful things we have. You know, gestures of truth, you know, of knowledge, of wisdom, you know, recognition of compassion and connection. You know, that when all of the monumental architecture becomes dust, and when all of the, you know, metal tools break down, whenever everything falls apart, those are the only things that are left. You know, across the world, across every history, any and all histories of pain and atrocity, all of them dissolve, and the only thing that remains is these things: our love, our connection, our community, our breath itself, our light. And so I continue to remind myself and remind those that see my work and remind the world in a way through my work of those truths, because it's really all I know. You know, it's, I think, really all we all know. And the rest is stuff, you know, that we are building, hopefully, to contain those things. Our monumental architecture should be built to contain our humanity, you know, and our love and connection to each other. Our tools should be meant to, you know, break down and build up things that support our communities and humanity itself. So yeah, so my work tries to, even though it's ineffable, even though it's difficult to grasp or even to hold on to or to utilize as like a tool to fight, you know, for justice, it is the most powerful thing we have. And so that's, yeah.
Thank you.
All right, does anyone?
If no one else is going to ask, I'm going to ask another one. I didn't, because again, I haven't seen it, but I was curious if you went through like traditional publishing path and kind of what that timeline was.
Yeah, I didn't, not necessarily totally traditional. I actually designed and did all of the editing and, you know, everything for the book, because I'm also one of these weird artist that does everything. Literally, you know, all the parts. And so I made the book first, and I had it as a self-published book as a part of my first show. I created a small personal press called Black Godex Press, and I made the book under that name. And then it was picked up by Daraja Press in Kenya. They're a Kenyan and Canadian press. And so they did a run of the book as well, and we co-published it. So I worked out a small co-publishing, but it was not like a traditional large-scale publishing, which is something in the future. I know I've talked to Nancy about, like, what's that look like? Because I'm curious too what those types of things look like too.
That's a quick question. You have these three extraordinary pieces nestled between the panels with the Heart of Darkness. So I wondered if you could speak to these three, or is there a relationship in your mind?
Yeah, so this is a new work. This is the Afrofuture Guardian series, and it's a small piece of an extensive work that I'm building out right now that will eventually become large-scale freestanding sanctuaries, all made of copper with these spirit beings. These pieces are, like I was saying just a moment ago, kind of carrying truths. I imagined the future, the fact that Black and brown people exist in the future, and Black elders exist in the future. So can I imagine Black elders from the future speaking back to us now, and what would they say? You know, what are the most essential truths that they might carry forward to guide us into harmony? And so each one of them are carrying these sort of wordless essential truths. You're asking. And yeah, the process is, you know, a whole beautiful process of hand etching, using waxes, and then salt water and electricity. So I'm also sort of trying to draw together these elemental elements, I mean, particularly salt water, you know, with the long history of the transatlantic slave trade and the relationship of bodies in that salt water to electricity and the power, the power of electrical conductivity. And so copper itself is incredibly conductive, pouring electricity and salt through creates a really powerful process. So, yeah, this is new work. And yeah, together, I thought, and Nancy as curator too, was like, I want these and these. And so it's a great combo, I think, too.
All right, brilliant. Thank you all so much. So there's copies of the book for sale, and of course Nikesha is here to sign them. I know some people got some before this event started. Yeah, thank you all so much for coming out.
Thank you.